Afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome. It's Sunday Sessions, 13th of December 2020. Well, thank you all for joining me, and people who are on live and people who are going to be watching this as an archive later. This is our weekly time of exploring our nature-centered folklore, connecting this to your favorite sanctuary space, and expressing inspired visions from your sanctuary through your poetry, writing, art, craft, performance, and problem solving. Now, today's session, it is Osín, Elen, and the Reindeer Folklore. And I haven't got my pictures lined up. I've got a lot of pictures today. And there's the symbol of that one. And that's what we're covering today. And there's going to be quite a few photos from the books of Elen Of The Ways by Carolyn Wise, Ellen Sentier, and also Judith Shaw. Yeah, so I'll be putting links to these people a bit later on because they're all interesting. And when we have a panel of live guests later on, I'm sure they're going to be talking. Someone's turned up. Donna's here. Thanks for turning up. She's one of the panel. And this topic of folklore, deer folklore, has grown in interest more than ever during the last 10 years, and especially this year. So I'm going to be sharing stories and inspirations from Osín the Bard, Elen of the Ways, the deer goddess, and a few more related tales. And as I thought of this and started jotting down some prompts and triggering my memory, I discovered this is a really huge topic. So most of the subject will need to move on to the she, water, and tree folklore, of course. But I'm going to get through as much as I can today because I want to allow some decent time for our panel guests and see what I can cover in the next 30 to 40 minutes. And then we're going to have a guest panel session for probably the last 20 minutes. Now, panel guests on this session later on, Ina Guman, I hope she'll be able to join us. With Trista Haggerty, unfortunately, has just been hit by a storm. Their internet's down. So unfortunately, Shirley won't be with us. Donna Johnson's in the green room, so we know we got her on for you a bit later. And if you're active in the comments, I may slip a link to you and invite you to join us on the panel and chat away with us about how you work with the deer goddesses, with Elen Of The Ways, etc. Let's see who we've got on board already. I know there's Donna, as I say, is sitting there. There's a few people who have commented away here. And that's it. There's good morning, Donna. You've called them blustery too in New Mexico. There we go. Brittany, good morning to you. Winnipeg, lovely. And Asia, I forgot that right, County Galway. Will this be recorded? Yes, it automatically goes into archive. And you will find on the Karakori Journal channel that all of these Sunday sessions are all down on the Karakori Journal kind of playlist. Also on Facebook, they're all recorded there. And if you go to karakoricottage.com, you'll see them all listed there as well. And Marcella's here from Bray. Have volume up full, still hard to hear. How's anybody else doing as far as the volume goes? I haven't changed the settings. Is everybody, give me a thing. This is like the Zoom, isn't it? Can you hear me? As I say, we're talking about shamanism and this like sort of psychic reading stuff article. Is anybody there? So please send me a note that you're actually hearing me. And there's Sherry there. Good morning, snowy Wisconsin. And I hope the sound is getting over to you there. So, great. Let's get started. Long before the stories of Santa, this is what brings this up. And I don't know if you can see them behind me. If I perhaps knock that lighting off again, I've got my wooden deer each side of me. Later on, I'll actually bring one up close to you. I wonder if there's the lighted wooden deer. That's made by, he's been in the news, he's a 15-year-old lad. I think he's in Leigh City or County Offaly that way. And he's been making thousands of these from his workshop and sending them around. Great fun to have. I'll bring one up close a little bit later. But anyway, long before the stories of Santa and reindeer were told, there were stories of the deer mother that was being shared. And she was one that was in the skies and flying through the longest night of winter, the solstice, the Yule night, to bring the gift of the returning light. Now, it's a bit embarrassing for Rudolph, who is supposed to lead Santa, because he may well have shed his antlers before Christmas, while the female reindeers, they keep theirs. The season of the male antlers is from March or April is when they come, but they only last until October, maybe November. And by the time it's Christmas, they're gone. But for the female, they keep their antlers. And their antlers are on them until probably May, early May, when they actually calf. And they're only without antlers for a few weeks. They're back again at the end of May and June, and then got them for the rest of the year. So Rudolph, I don't know. The female deer are never without for long, and each year male and female antlers, they actually grow longer, and there's more of them than they had the year before. And the elder female reindeer leads the herd. This is the oldest one, the wisest one, and one of the reasons might be is because she has the biggest antlers. Now, I've been avoiding giving you some pictures. Here we go. I think that's wonderful for the idea of bringing the light, the deer mother, and I think this is a shore picture. There's the deer running through the night. And the vision of the otherworld deer goddess as being inspired as the wisest deer. I think that's a lovely picture. There's a very wise female deer goddess type deer, the eldest, wisest deer of the herd. And because she would be best, she'd be the wisest because she'd also know the weather changes more than the others, where the food will be, and also the safest places to be away from predators. Now, likewise, the tribes that follow the deer also depend on visions of wisdom from the deer goddess, because you get the elder leading the deer, you've got the deer following that elder, and then you've got the nomadic people following the deer. And they're looking for visions from the tree goddess that they feel that the elder deer is very much a kind of a medium, a conduit towards. Let's give a sort of deer goddess sort of vision there of sorts. But many tribes in ancient times, more than today, they depended on the deer, the reindeer. And especially during winter, because they need the deer for the milk, the meat, the clothing for themselves, extra clothing, and probably more material for the shelter. Now, reverence of the tree-like antlers, because there's this thing, they got the antlers, they get bigger each year. And I imagine that's an incredible symbol of like a growing tree. That's definitely one of wonder. And the deer goddess will be imagined, or even the leading, the elder one, as having massive tree-like antlers. And I love this one. It's been around Facebook quite a bit. Let's give you a sensible one. I love this imagery of that, of the tree-like antlers, emerging of the tree next to the deer. There's an incredible sort of synthesis on that. I love that picture. But it does seem deer antlers were associated with the tree of life. So let's give that one. Got so many deer pictures, I just want to throw them up for you. So the antlers themselves even associated with the tree of life. At solstice, the reindeer were revered as being incarnations of the tree of life, and the tree of life returning the light. The light's going to come back for seeding the next cycle of fertility. And it's not clear how the deer folklore descended to here in Ireland. It certainly got here in dribs and drabs and in different ways. A lot of what I'm going to be talking about is the kind of ancestry of this from Siberia, Mongolia, and perhaps how it traveled, and a little bit of what seems to have dropped into Ireland and changed and evolved into this culture that evolved on this island has become Ireland. It's quite well known, as I say, that for thousands of years, there has been the deer following and the deer reverence and the deer necessary for existence through Siberia, through Mongolia, and then as you go west, passing on through the north, the Russian, the Germanic, and hopefully we've got Germanic guests coming along very shortly, Eastern Europe, and then going the other way, crossing over the bridge from what is now Russia to Alaska. I'll be talking about that in a moment. And so, of course, it features a lot in the North American Canadian folklore as well. And the people of the tribes that followed and lived the deer folklore would have their own shaman as well, that would have been their leader, would have been a kind of medium, conduit, and shaman to the deer goddess, a bit like the way I suppose we look at clerics and priests and ministers today. So here's a contact to the deer mother there. And they also hold the faith in the deer goddess, being a guide through the rites of passage, birth, life, death, rebirth. And it's interesting to compare the deer people with the tree people tribes. And that's something that came to Ireland eventually. You wouldn't believe it, as I've said in other Sunday sessions, as if the Irish are tree people without trees. But both have similar world tree-like reverence. There's the combination again. The deer antlers being compared to the world tree, as I mentioned. And tree people are generally not nomadic. They usually have a territory that they move around, and but they keep in good range of what they regard as their mother trees. So the deer people, they follow the deer because they can't herd deer like cattle. They can't, with the cattle, they can decide which fields are and where they go. Not with deer. The humans are obliged to actually follow the deer, though they do herd them a bit more now. And they trust and let the elder deer lead the herd, and the tribe follows. Now, I've heard from Northern USA, when I was up in Michigan and Wisconsin. Tribal people said that they believe that what we call the ley lines are actually formed by the migration routes of the deer. Now, in ancient Ireland, it was similar with the ancient cattle. It seems that during the megalithic age, though they were settled people that were here and they were building a lot of structures, it seems there was a climate change time. It was getting warmer. They had clear skies, sunny skies, and because there was a lot of sun, a lot of warmth, the grazing grass started to become scarce, and the cattle didn't hang around. They had to go off and get some grass. They needed to eat, they needed to graze. So off they went. So it turned out that the ancient people changed from being a settled farming people to having to follow their cattle as they wandered. Because once they went around, they couldn't herd them. And along these cattle routes, they built cairns like we have up at Carrickeel near here, and one of these like Carramore, Loughcrew. And archaeologists now and anthropologists believe that they were built to bank the bones of their ancestors because they couldn't really take them with them. Anyway, I'm going to go on to flying deer. I'm going to have a look. I've been getting a lot of messages coming through and I'm ignoring. So excuse me while I see what people are saying about this. It may be just junk mail, so excuse me for a second. Yeah, there's a piece of junk mail. Obviously going on to something here. Oh, Ina. Hang on, I'll just send her a message. Right. Sorry for that interruption there. Now, for a moment or two, I'd like to talk about the flying deer. As we're familiar with Santa and his sleigh, and deer flying may have come from the Siberian folklore. Let's see, I have something on this. And it's said that the shamans there, they consumed magic mushrooms, amanita, and fly agaric, and other magic mushrooms. And then we have a few more magic mushrooms there. Deer flying might have come from the Siberian folklore, as I say, related to the consuming of the magic mushrooms. Maybe they inserted the magic mushrooms as salves, like I was saying about witches, broomsticks, and folklore. Excuse me, I really need a secretary here today with all the messaging. Sorry about that, right? That's an inappropriate one. Oh God, guys, this is message. If anybody is messaging me, right. Turn the volume up on your mic. People are having hard trouble. And so that's, was again messages, you're having trouble with volume, so it's not just me. Victoria Gainer says, can hear. Dana says she's having trouble with the volume here. Right, let's get this volume right. Wanting from Boston, having a hard time with volume also. Sounds like using it. Let's see, I'm going to try and get this mic properly, just to make sure they haven't skipped my mic. Right, is that better for you? Is that coming on? How's that doing, audio? That's yeah, I'm getting audio showing here, so that should be a lot better. So sorry if you've missed stuff on that. Volume, I can hear you. Having trouble with volume. So we got that sorted. Perfect. We're back. Right, so we're back on that. So there we go. Yes, very good. I don't know what happened there. I just switched it off, switched it back on, and there we're yes, sorted. Thank you very much. Sorry about that. And well, I hope you enjoyed the pictures. So it's good to hear. I was talking about the magic mushrooms and how they see the deer flying, and whether these shamans consume mushrooms to purposely see flying deer, or whether they saw flying deer after they consume the mushrooms, that's very much in debate. And whether this was one of the ones they take, we don't know. Now, a lot of deer imagery and deer reverence celebrations include deer with moon and stars in their antlers. And I love this picture. I couldn't find the moon and stars in the antlers. Maybe this is when I should show you my wooden deer here. Here we go. This is one of the, there we go. That's one of the wooden deer. And there's got the stars in his antlers, or her antlers, I should say. So that's one of the wooden deer there, and I've got one on the other side here as well. So assume after being intoxicated by the mushrooms, if you saw a deer leap, just doing a regular leap, twilight time between daylight and nighttime, then if you were away with these mushrooms, it's sure to look like the flying deer in the sky. And I'm sure such an experience would be enough to equip a person to share a revelation of how they saw the deer flying. And people would start calling them a shaman. And there we go, we have a deer shaman there. And I'm sure these early shaman people were women. And here's one that you might be familiar with. And they still are today, a lot of them. But and I'm sure these shaman women at the time would be not much different to the women we label as witches today. But shamanism did seem to become more of a male domain for a long time. And of course, that's the way of the last 2,000 years. But now it seems to have balanced itself out. And the shamanism, as people call it, seems to be explored and taught by people of all genders. Now, stories of these shaman types delivering magic mushrooms to people, and that's supposed to be, some people tell of that as being the origin of Santa in the sky and landing and dropping presents. But I can't quite see that myself. I can't imagine shamans promoting a do-it-yourself. I do believe in the idea that everybody could be a shaman, but often these people, when they've been elevated to the shaman, they like that elite position, and they're a bit reluctant for other people to take that position. So the idea of just going around people's homes, chimneys or whatever it is, and hey, have some magic mushrooms, can't see it myself. I think they're more likely to invite people around to share their mushrooms and offer to be their guides while they use the mushrooms. So there's a bit of a modern confusion, because sometimes when we mention the idea of women having antlers, it surprises people. Of course, I mentioned about if you didn't catch it on the volume, of how this time of year, Rudolph wouldn't have any antlers on them, which is quite ridiculous. So if he was pulling Santa's sleigh, he wouldn't have any antlers on, because this is a time males don't have antlers. They've lost them in November, and they don't get them again until well into the year again. Whereas the women, they only lose them for a few weeks in May. So anyway, we do have reference to some, let's see these characters. I brought him up a bit earlier. There was Serenunus. That's one of the horned animals that we regard the male ones. And then there's Herne the Hunter. There we go. There's two male characters that have horns on them. Now, the male horn creature image seems to have come from 2,000 years of religious conditioning, as I was saying. And so that any creature with horns, they must be dark, be evil, and be male. But for those who look into the yin and yang from the East, the feminine is dark, possibly underworld, and the male is light. And you just have to think of what goes on in the forest. And I've been talking of this, obviously, in Sunday sessions, previous ones, that once you go underground in the forest, you've got this incredible social network of roots and fungi, mosses, and it's all connecting and ebbs and flows and balancing each other. But the moment the tree comes above the surface, the moment the wild flowers come above the surface, even the fungi, as soon as it comes about the surface, they're individuals and they're all competing for the light. And I think that's a great description, like the yin and yang, the male, female. There's the dark network underground, and there you have the fight for the light once above ground. Isn't that a typical sort of male and female interaction? Well, some of the local folklore stories here tell of women or the kayak or the hag as having a cold, still womb at midwinter. But they need the hot energy male to place a log on their womb hearth to ignite it. And then they unite together in conception so that the incubation and a new birth of everything happens in spring at Imbolc. But it needs that grand conception of Yule. And I'll be talking about this next week's session, a bit more about that. But no wonder that after Midwinter in the north, it could be imagined as the tree of life growing again each time that we come to Midwinter, that we come to Yule. And I did have a lovely picture for that. Lots of pictures. There we go. Here's a nice tree of life one there. Lovely illustration of that. And the antlers growing from the deer mother again too. And is this what the ancient cave drawings were all about, the cave art? Saying this is the home of the deer mother. I think, is this cave art about the deer mother rather than saying, hey, everybody, we killed a deer today. So is that what these cave art is? It honoring the deer mother? Now, the deer goddess presence was not just for the grand conception either, because it links to life cycles, but the deer mother was looked to, especially in winter, for the healing. The healing and caring was especially needed for those of us sillies today with perhaps mental health challenges through the lack of light in the midwinter. And the deer goddess cares for those in the dark, in the melancholy, while she is the symbol of the returning light. And now the deer goddess symbol is also a reminder of our cycles, and I think this is a Judith Shaw one. And Donna will recognize that because she did a Facebook post with this. So that's a reminder of our cycle. It's a lovely drawing for that. That everything is in a complete cycle. There's never a death, but it's linked to transformation of life, shedding our cloak, the old snake skin, and so that the new skin, the new spring is new, fresh, reborn again into the new extending light of another cycle. And there's three images that linger, I feel, with Christmas. And those are the red Santa suits. There we go, red Santa suits, deers with big antlers, and robin birds. And I think that deer has got some, it's got robin birds on that. And there's another one I like with, that's a cushion cover with a deer with some robin birds in it as well. Now, the red Santa suits are often translated as being a Coca-Cola stunt, and I suppose in many ways I did bring it back. But the Siberian and Mongolian shaman women, they used berries to stain their textiles, stain their cloth. And through doing that, they wore red suits. There's a red suited one. I had another picture of a red suit. I wonder if that's here. Yeah, there's a red suit riding a deer there. But some of them, they stain green. So you get some of them green as well. Now, the robin imaged on the antlers as, let's see if I can get the robin back again. There he goes. It's probably some other bird in origin, probably a corvid. But I believe the robin is there to remind us of flight. But the robin used because of the red breast, I'm sure. But added to that, the images of the deer with the moon and stars in their antlers. I show a couple of that, one with the moon, a bit more with soul, moon and stars. Not quite in the antlers, but I think quite nice pictures. So it's a wonder how these images have stayed in the psyche about midwinter for thousands of years. And they're with us now. I'm going to talk a bit, I'm moving on. I hope you don't mind with the distraction. Donna, we'll be about 10 minutes, I think, before bringing you on. But some storytellers tell us of the deer folklore arriving here in Ireland through the Scythian traders. And they said that Scythians, they carried Siberian folklore all across westwards into Northern Europe. And then the North and Eastern traders or Eastern Europe traders, they would socialize, pick up the stories, and they would tell the stories going along, and perhaps they arrived in Ireland that way. But I also asked, were the Scythians actually traders? Were they just reindeer followers who traded reindeer resources on the way? And there we go. There's a trader there. I don't know if he's Scythian, but I just thought that fits the bill. Or were they actually reindeer followers primarily that traded in reindeer resources to the settled people that they passed by on the way? And the ancient deer followers seem to have gone west from Siberia into Europe, but they also went east over the fabled land bridge between Russia and Alaska. I've got some maps here. There you go. That sort of light blue area was the land bridge. And there's an actual photo of some land bridge land. And I think there's another map I got here that I can show you that, of when it was all joined together thousands of years ago. So there's a lot of Scythian art that seems to tell the story of their deer connection. There's various stuff in museums, and at least a connection to the deer mother or a deer goddess. There's some sort of various brooches. There's that one there, and there's another one for you there. And over the millenniums, the shamans, who the tribes believed were mediums and conduits to the deer mother, took on more and more image of the deer themselves. They became the deer by wearing deer heads, deer skins, robes, and antlers themselves. So the deer people themselves began to believe that they were more spirited, in a more spirited, humanized deer mother rather than the full deer form. So it seems there was a transition over thousands of years where there was reverence to this unseen deer mother, deer goddess, that they would look to through the conduit of the elder deer, the head of the herd they were following. But suddenly their own shaman, dressed up to impersonate that head deer, was suddenly the conduit and regarded again the same way as the Pope and leaders of religion. So unfortunately, I don't know if it's fortunate or unfortunately, but the idolism changed from the animal to the human being. Now, another version of the Scythian migration story is that they were Scotty. I don't know if you've heard of that, that we hear of Erin, Eriu, but this land also, the island of Ireland, was known as Scotia or Scotty. And that kind of name moved forward, and eventually it was used for the naming of Scotland as it is now. But the Scotty were really people, they say, from the Middle East that settled in Iberia, and they arrived in Ireland via Iberia, and they're better known to us in story as the Milesians, sons of Mil. And I brought their story up several times in Sunday sessions. But reminder, they're told of as being the tree people, because Gaelic, it goes back into their name. It's quite twisted, but it really means the people of the trees. And the stories about these sons of Mil is that they were descended from a grandfather who was half human and half hazel. But there is another version I've heard and read that says that their grandmother was a deer goddess with huge antlers. And the folklore of deer, especially reindeer, do actually include the use of hazel, because the hazel was used as a magic wood that would morph deer into humans and humans back into deer again. So it's interesting, the crossover of stories. The tree people with the hazels, they were born from a half hazel, half human grandparent, or was the grandmother a deer person? And that, of course, that's storytelling of that time. Now, the deer mother faith of the so-called Milesians seems to have migrated from the Minoan culture. And some of that has entered the Greek mythology. If I got a picture of here, yes, here we go, of Cyrenitis, the Golden Hind, and there are cave paintings later out that depict her, and that comes from the Minoan, and I think that came with the Milesians as well. So how did the ancient deer people arrive in Ireland in more ancient times, before the Milesians, before the arrival of the Milesians? Well, there's stories with increasing anthropology finds to support them of two very different tribes arriving on what is now the island of Ireland. First, the short people race that migrated from where the Sahara Desert is now. There was the rainforest back when that rainforest was fading away from there, and that was several thousand years before the Sons of Mill came. Then there was this tribe. They lived from the forest, lived by water and by loch sides, and they knew how to fish. Now, another ancient tribe is said to have arrived about 1,000, 2,000 years after them, and these people were taller, and they were farming people, settled people. They were like Noah's Ark, many of them, bringing in these animals 2 by 2 of animals they genetically changed over thousands of years. There were cattle, pigs, poultry, dogs, cats, and reindeer. And their idea, they got milk from cattle, but deer was important to them for tools. But this first race, when they saw that these deer were nomadic, they could live with those. And there was some sort of adaptability to this first race that were by the waters. And they started following them around. And they found that they could actually digest the milk from the reindeer. Anyway, there's a sort of baby reindeer for that. I got to move forward so I can get, we've got just Donna. Be back with you, Donna. I'm waiting for someone else to come along because hopefully we'll get Ina come along and see if anybody else wants to come on live as well. But these first race, they discovered the benefits of meat, clothing, nomadic shelter. So the reindeer, they adapted to them and maybe other deer, and they would have reverence to those. It provided what they needed. And so there was Thanksgiving, and the deer goddess is the unseen that we put it into an image, create images and idols. And presumably they shaped these idols into wood, stone, through wearing the garments, the skull masks, to impersonate their sacred deities. And of course, the one thing about the Yule, I'll talk about this more, is that anything that's living comes from a womb or a seed vessel somewhere. And so these deities that cared for humans would be feminine. So that's how the deer goddess came into being. Now, the grand conception coming up, it's interesting to think of Mother Christmas now instead of Father Christmas. And even in the old Irish and Scottish solstice stories, there's always a woman. It's always the woman that lures the men to mate with them at the grand conception time of Yule. I think I'll go more into this next week. But the moment of midwinter is the men don't do the luring. Anyway, I'm going to move on forward to that because I am moving on the time here. But I'll talk about that, the kayaks, the hags, the Morna Coracuen, and Bayek Moor. And often these images of these wise women are accompanied by deer and hounds. And this is a Michael Quirk thing of the Morrigan, the Morna Coracuen. And when I get to the story of Oisin, I'll introduce stories of the hounds protecting the deer. I'm going to do a few minutes of that. And this is a side. There you go. You get a vision of the deer on the side of that Michael Quirk. And then on the other side, we've got the hounds that protect the deer. Anyway, these wise spirit women are said to call the deer in winter. And I think I want to bring up some videos. I got a lovely video here. It might sum up a bit of what I've been talking about. I'll let you see this for a few seconds. I hope I got the right one here. But this is fun. Let's see. Go. La, 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 yo, lo, la, 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 Okay, now I wonder if you noticed the last second or two. I suppose you couldn't help but notice. But notice there who wore the antlers. I mentioned that a bit earlier, didn't I? Now there's in Scotland, there's various other names for these wise women. Let's get some banners up for you. Here we go with some names. You've got the Morna Coracune, which I'm often mentioning as what I learned was the Morrigan's a kind of a more modern translation. The big spirit in the sort of vessel, the corrie, inside anyway. And weaving, it's the pot where there's the weaving. And then we've got the Balakmore, and then we've got the Doida. The Doida is an interesting one because the woman spirits of the Doida and the Glishtig, which is Scottish. The Doida is like the Scottish equivalent of the kayak. They didn't talk about the kayak bearer now, but they did talk about the Doida. And of Midwinter, there was a man that would appear, man spirit, and would lay with the Doida, and that would be the grand conception for the spring ahead. And so that man who came each year was known as the servant of the Doida. Coming to Ireland, the Doida has become the Dagda. And that's the story I know, the good god of Ireland. But in Scotland was the Doida. That's how we got those names there. Now, the ancient Scottish hunters before the land was Scotland, and the hunters were Gaels. Let's see if I can. Now I've got something else. I'm trying to get something else up for you. They were tree people, and they were the Era Gael. They were deer people. They were tree people. And say Era Gael with a sort of Scottish accent. The Era Gael, you got Argyll. And so they regarded the deer as cattle of the kayak, the she, the fairies, and of the Doida. Anyway, I'm going to have to move along pretty quickly here. I'm going to put a lot of this away on the course I'm doing. We're going to come on to Elen Of The Ways very soon. Earlier I mentioned about the deer herds tracking the ways that what we describe as ley lines today. And where the deer wisdom reached what we call mainly UK, not Northern Ireland yet, the folklore of the Elen Of The Ways, it did come to evolve. And I'm trying to find my, get back to my pictures here, because I want to give one of the author books here. Losing my way. I need Elen Of The Ways to find my way around this again. There we go. This is from the British Museum, a familiar picture of Elen. It's been around in some form for about 1,000 years. So I'm going to come back to that shortly. But the Elen is a bit like Breeder, where we have the breeder of Kildare, but the goddess Breeder, and there was Breeder who was the kind of human living symbol of that. Elen seems to have come from the 3rd century, born to a father, Constantine of Wales. And when she had inherited from him, she disowned the elite trappings that she was brought up with and followed the deer tracks of Wales to revive the instinct and earth sovereignty of the ancient people, to bring that back. But I'm going to talk more about that very soon. I'm going to get onto your comments. I'm going to go onto Ossian very quickly, and then we're going to get, I'm going to have a chat with Donna, because she's the only one that's turned up at the moment. And I hope you're still hearing me quite clear. We got a bunch of you around, lots of comments. Goodness, let's try and get through a few of these before I get onto Ossian. Thank you for wonderful, interesting stories. In the Netherlands, we also see different tribes entering the country. Thank you, Jomin, for being with us. Tina, interesting, beautiful illustrations. Glad you're enjoying this. Margie, I haven't put that video on yet. I'm going to have to, before we go into Ossian, Margie sent me a video. It's so typical Lockheed, Rockingham. And Ina, what's she doing? Let me know when we're starting the panel. I find it disrupting my Okay, Ina, give it another 5 minutes. I'm going to go through Ossian and then come on board. It's great to have you. And then Rainy Main, there's Sherry with her deer. Sorry, I haven't got deer horns. I couldn't find any in the market. But just in case for those who, there we go. We got 2 of these. There's the wooden deer. So let's put that back there. full of light. And before I go into the Ocean, let's see if I can pick up. Margie sent this. You'll either loathe it or love it. This video here. And Margie's sent this. This is in Lockheed Forest. So typical of what happens in Lockheed, I must admit. It's that type of place. Okay, here we go.
You know, that plump little guy in the red suit with the long white beard? All us reindeer are looking for him. What do you mean he's under the sleigh? Well, don't look at me. And they're flying underneath the sleigh. Did the reindeer finally turn on him that day? Who knows? He stalled out on the lawn, and the presents all are gone. But the elves have hatched a plan to get their way. Oh. Now when the reindeer were questioned, here's what they said. Dasher thought it was an accidental mishap. And Dancer said that Santa slipped and fell. Oh, but Comet claims a UFO fell from the sky and knocked him down. Cupid said it was no dart. Who can tell? Oh, Santa's lying underneath the sleigh. Did the reindeer finally turn on him that day? Who knows? He stalled out on the lawn, and the presents all are gone. But the elves have hatched a plan to get their way. Oh, Santa's lying underneath the sleigh. What happened? No one knows, or so they say. He's face down in the snow, and no one really knows what happened to him on that Christmas day. Oh, it just won't be Christmas without Santa.
Okay. As I say, you'll love it or loathe it. Anyway, back to the seriousness, I suppose, of this this session. Now, Ocean is these are stories of both Ben Bourbon in Sligo, and also of there's a Sligo picture here. If you're not familiar with Ben Bourbon, and the Culan's Isle of Skye, which you'll see on a video in a moment. But they both have connections with Finn McCall, Ben Bourbon, and the Culan's in the Isle of Skye. That's why they're called the Culan's. And the Ocean stories, they're also like the Elen, a 3rd century, a time of the High King Cormac MacArt, and as I say, time of Elen too. And this was before the abbots were bringing and introducing the Psalms and Gospels to Ireland, a couple of 100 years before Patrick arrived. Now, before I get into this, I'm going to have a nice video. Gregor Lavery was going to be on board, but he can't. He's in the middle of his album. He did record something, it was a few months ago, because he was going to be a guest a few months ago, but something went wrong. Just to give you his spelling, there he is. You might be familiar with him as a member of the Afro-Celt sound system. So I'm going to treat you to something. He's going to kick off with a wee bit about Ocean, and I'll leave him to find the video. I'll let him roll away for you.
I come Ocean new. I mean, who was sort of on in the hell? Because the show Cloignal, Huak. I'm up on the hill. You can hear the cuckoo singing away behind me there. And hier kan me voelen in de hel. Benetere, guess the stachen and behind me there's benetere and the stachen and stachen in een. Fins, pillars. Finn as in Fionn MacCool. And Fionn was the father of Ocean. Ocean, the archetype of the semi-mythological Gaelic bard figure, and a huge volume of our songs and stories, or songs in particular, that were sung not so long ago here, called Finian Lays in English, are ascribed to Ocean. And these are localized versions of songs. It's not so much a standard. But anyway, I'm going to give you a wee verse of one of those songs, but just behind me, as I said, is Vince Puller's Stachken Neen. And usually when you find a place name that's got the names of the Fianna associated with them, you would have found it would have been a very important place in our history. So, you know, when my Native American friends were here earlier in the year, you know, we were seeing things like this, and definitely what they call in indigenous traditions around the world a high place, a place where there's a connection with the spirits. And I think essentially a lot of these stories are talking about spirits of the land and ancestral ties to hunting grounds, sacred hunting grounds. And you know, you're going to hear a lot more stuff like that in my work and in my album that's coming up later on towards the end of the year. But Kayu no Kaye, I thought I'd sing a wee verse of a song while I'm up here, a song that was collected in indigenous oral tradition from a lady who lived just up the road there in Kinmaluaik, and I believe she was possibly a very distant relative of mine, Mary Ross. My people here in Skye were Rossies as well. And the song was made by Osín for his mother, who gave birth to him when she was in the form of a deer. You get a lot of this metamorphosizing into animals in our old indigenous stories. And anyway, I'd just like to say that I think that all the problems that they're facing in America just now with racism, I think a lot of it has to do with people losing their culture and losing their connection to the land. And I think that, you know, white people in America who have got a problem with people who look different could maybe benefit from learning a little bit about where their ancestors came from. That's all I'm going to say. Caillou, here's a bit of this ancient song anyway. Ancient, I use the word ancient loosely to all my scholar friends. Mas tu ma vel hyrskar fiego, mi haran oha. Jules lie men kan jesach, mi haran oha. Eho huri riviko, na huri haran oha. Jules lie men kan jesach, mi haran oha. Ech galostra grif na canu, fed mi haren oho. Eho huri riviko, na huri haren oho. Ech galostra grif na canu, fed mi haren oho. Shachan kultje shachan loos, fed mi haren oho. Eho huri riviko, na huri haren oho. Shachan kultje shachan loos, fed mi haren oho. Spran mach kvoje knav na fieg, fed mi haren oho. Eho huri riviko, na huri haren oho. Spran mach kvoje knav na fieg, fed mi haren oho. Ech galostroch lan am arne, fed mi haren oho. Eho huri riviko, na huri haren oho. Ech galostroch lan am arne, fed mi haren oho. Clan arnes yn cwch can, fed mi haren oho. Eho huri riviko, na huri haren oho. And that is a much, much longer song, but we're up to 5 minutes. I can see it on my screen here already. Hope you're all staying safe. I'll look forward to chatting with you all soon.
Great, Grigor Lavery for you. I hope you enjoyed the scenes of up in the Coollands there, as well as Grigor himself. Now, what Grigor was referring to was works of the works translated in from the Gaelic to in English by the author James Macpherson, and it's a bit controversial. This was a book, 1790, I think it is. He came out with this book, the works of Osín, and of course 1790 was really early in printing times, and but it was controversial with the claim that actually James Macpherson actually took took ballads from other ballad singers and claimed they were Ossians, but the Scots adapted to them, and as far as they're concerned, they belong to Ossian. And what have I got? That's an inside illustration from that book. But going briefly, I won't have time to really go through the Irish stories, but Finn McCool, and there he has his two hounds, which you may be familiar with. The stories of them in Kildare, and well, these were Bron and Scullion. They were children of his aunt, Turin, who'd been also turned into a hound, and quickly trying to get through this. So sorry in the rush of them. But the hounds themselves, there was a fawn coming up the Hill of Allen in Kildare, there just north of Kildare and Newbridge. I haven't got any pictures of it because it's now a damn quarry. It looks ugly, which is a shame. But the fawn was coming up the hill, and the two hounds, they chased the fawn down. But when they got to the bottom, they actually found there was an association. They became friends, and they came up, and there they are, the best of friends, the two hounds. And what it was, I suppose you might well know the story. To be very quick with it, I'll put it into the course, but as soon as it got to the top, faced Finn McCool, the fawn then became a beautiful woman. They got married. Finn McCool had no interest in battles, blah, blah, blah. But there was this person, Dark. I'm trying to think of his Irish name. Well, the Sadhbh was the name of the deer that came up. And then there was this fairy man called Dark, because he turned her into a deer because she refused his advances. He was the Feodoric, as mentioned in the book of Leinster. Anyway, the story was that Dark came along and chased the deer away. Dark's hounds chased the deer away. So Finn McCool, he went looking in all the forests around Ireland. He ended up landing in County Sligo, Keishcoran near here. But when he went hunting boar around, that's the side of Benbourbon, and he spotted this naked teenager, and there's a whole story of how he recognized him as his son. So that's as much as I can really say that I got time for. And then there's a sort of a famous story of when Ossian fell in love with this beautiful woman. That in one story she does appear as they're hunting. She appears as a beautiful woman. She lures him to Tien and Og. And there's another one where McMahon, because she's the daughter of and she lured him. But McMahon turned her head into a pig to make her look as a pig, so that when she approached him, this is the second story, that if he accepted her as the head of the pig, then he was a genuine mate, and she would turn into the beautiful person. Shame I haven't got time to go more into those stories, but I'm going to have to switch on so I can introduce Donna, and hopefully we will have Ina on. I'm going to just rush right through to Elen Of The Ways. So that, I'll leave you to read that for a moment. And she's very much a vision, Elen Of The Ways, I think, very much a vision to help women, I suppose, get back on track. I was saying about Ellen following the deer tracks, and it's so similar to the ley lines. And in the past Sunday sessions, I've spoken about women who stare into sacred wells. There we go, there's one there. And this staring into the sacred wells to receive visions from simple, who's the mate I'm going to meet, but really for the much more complex, who is the person I really am. So Elen Of The Ways sometimes seems to me a totem of guiding personal vision quests. And the settled people these days, we go shopping in supermarkets for food, maybe shop online for everything else. But what I think we've done is we've lost connection of following the herd for food, shelter, warmth, and healing. So a dear goddess, dear mother seems to represent something to us quite different, I think, now. And add to this a vision quest to follow the lines of the ways that, for one, said to connect the sacred wells that the deer once stopped to drink from, maybe. And there's a vision quest sort of picture. And this seems to be a new kind of evolution in ley line following that's been popular since the 19th century Romance time. First, people were following the Watkins Old Straight Track. And then in the 60s, there was John Michel's View over Atlantis. And now what seems to have become very popular is Caroline Wise's Finding Ellen. That's full of following straight tracks and observing solar alignments. And along with this, inspiration and ways to reach awareness and vision of our destinies, our own life alignments, and what we actually need to survive our journeys, like the nomads, like the people following the reindeer herds in Mongolia, Siberia, that was talking about earlier. So understanding their transitions, people understanding their transitions and personal transformations as we flow through them. There seems to be a passion, I dare say this is a man, so excuse me, that with the current feminist movement, it's very much seems to be about building, there's Ina, hello Ina, about building confidence, voice and vision to return the equality of our human existence. And some teachers seem to talk of the deer symbolism and their trods, it's no, it's a different word to ley lines, the trod ways, the trods, as being an important step into recognizing our pattern of human sovereignty with the earth rather than with the possessions. Just like Ellen rejected Constantine, her father Constantine, and all the trappings so that she could have sovereignty with the earth and following the ways. Just like we can break the mold of going to the supermarket exclusively for our food and ordering online, but doing things to connect to the earth, to understand our sovereignty, going back to what I was mentioning earlier, the underground and that whole network, and then coming above there and racing for the light. So the core motivation of the Dear Goddess Way seems to be for us to return to our instincts. I think I can sum it up, instincts for our survival. And there's Finding Ellen, there's the book here, but here's one. I think that's the one I was trying to get to. Anyway, I'm just rushing to get these people on. So it's more for our survival than work out if we have enough money in the bank to do a grocery shop. Trying to follow the old ways of the deer, also known, as I say, as trods, using our senses, and not all paths are visible to our eyes. So we continue to use our instinct to know where these paths go. And that may be our way of calling on the dear goddess to come, be present, be our guide. An instinct on what was a trust in knowing as we follow our vision path quests. All food, water, and shelter would be there as we need them, just like being present at those ancient spring wells where we stop, heal, and vision more. Well, as I've been, before I bring the panel of people on, I think that's as much as I can really cover. I've gone over time and I've cut about 2/3 of what I was going to cover out. Anyway, so excuse if it seems broken up today, but the song is magical, beautiful singing. That's going back there with Grigor. Thanks very much for that. So without further ado, I'd like to bring on our panel of guests at last to share their work and vision with the deer goddess and how it affects their lives, what they do in their lives, the way they mentor, how they work with the deer themselves, how they work with the people they work with. So I'm going to bring them on one at a time. Let's knock off all these labels that they've got here so we can actually see these people around. Now, well, I've lost that one. There we go. Right, so what I will do is I'm going to bring on, we've got Ina Guman. She's of the Lockgill Nature Wilderness School. Now, where are you? Why are you not on? It's because I've still got the picture. Right, there she is. There's Ina. Hello, Ina. I'm going to have to put my headphones on, the wee headphones, so I can actually hear what you got to say. Now, Ina is of the Lockgill Nature Wilderness School. And hello, Ina. Say hi, see if I got my headphones working.
Hello, John. How are you?
Very loud and clear. I've got my headphones, but good to see you. Great. As I say, Trista, we couldn't have her because she got a storm and knocked out our internet. She's of the Grail School. But we got the delightful Donna Johnson, who's passionate about deer mythology. Let's bring her up. There she is. And as expected, she has the deer horns on as well. And
I lost the sound here.
I can hear you.
Ah, good.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay.
Okay, are we supposed to speak to each other without John?
Oh, okay. I wasn't clear on that.
Okay, as you can see, I put my red deer shaman clothes on completely consciously.
Mm-hmm.
You have your antlers on. So how are you working? How are you working with the deer or with the deer goddess?
I also wear my green lady mask, which I wear at festivals sometimes.
so, you know, that's my contribution to the deer goddess. I can't even get it. There it is. Right. I'm going to take mine. Can you, I wonder if you can hear me if, no, you can't hear me if I'm trying to knock myself off, but so you actually can, because I forget how to do it with a panel, how I can knock it off and you still hear me. Let's find the instructions here. It's, how do I get rid of me? There's a way, there must be some means of
Just
getting
leave
rid of
yourself
me.
in, John. Why not?
Yes, I'll stay there. I was just trying to, because I can, as you speak, I can get more of you. And they've done some stuff. I think I can move myself around there. That's it. But let's see, just getting the controls. There's three buttons that do something. Right, okay. Now, if I remove myself.
Doesn't matter.
No. Yeah, no, that's somewhere else. Let's get myself over there. Let's get into position. Right, we're okay. Now, let's start. Ina, let's start with you. How do you work with the deer folklore yourself?
So, as you already mentioned, we are in the process of opening a wilderness school. And obviously, you know, the deer are a big part of wilderness. That's my daughter in the back.
That's a deer.
The deer. Yeah, and we have a lot of deer on our land. And I personally, I work with shamanic techniques as well. And I personally see that the deer are a very important part, where the deer goddess is a very important deity to connect with if you want to connect to nature. So I think, or what I experience is that the deer goddess can really remind us of this wildness inside of us and connect us to that part that is nature inside of us that we sometimes forget that we are nature, that we are part of nature. And the deer goddess can very much help us to find this part, connect to it. And I personally mostly connect to Sadhbh and Fleas, which is Fleas is one of our local goddesses, and she is very much she is also a goddess of cattle, of cows, but she is also a deer goddess, and she combines these two aspects of us being domesticated, but us also still being wild inside. And yeah, to learn about wilderness, it's a great thing to connect to the wild deer goddesses.
That's interesting that you brought up the reference of the deer and the cattle, as I was pointing out there, that what anthropologists and archaeologists coming together are discovering was how suddenly the cattle, as I mentioned earlier, became nomadic. So they were forced to, the story I was told at lectures is that they followed they had to follow the cattle because the cattle wandered off. There wasn't the grazing. And they said that a lot of these cairns, they were built by the women. It was the men that went off with the cattle because they couldn't herd them as before. So it's interesting to see the combination and how both of them would have been, it seems, regarded as being, as both the deer and the cattle as being cattle of the goddess. So it's interesting you bring that up. Donna, let's see how you're doing. Are there any deer flying over New Mexico at the moment?
Not in this part of New Mexico. We do have deer that live in our mountains. And child, I used to be a strange little kid that wandered off in the woods and never seemed to get lost. But since I was raised very Christian, nobody ever spoke of nature spirits or fairies or anything like that. I just never seemed to get lost. And I became very fond of the deer. I became very fascinated by them because they moved silently through the woods, always knowing where they were going. They could find pathways that I couldn't see. But over the years, I learned to be like the deer. I would pretend to be a deer. I taught myself to walk silently, to find the little pathways that other humans couldn't find. And when I got much, much older, I started studying shamanism and much more nature-based spiritualities, and discovered that there were deities, you know, from my own ethnic background. You know, I did not know at the time that my ancestry was Irish, Hungarian with a little Norwegian in it. But it turns out that there are deer goddesses in all traditions, all of those traditions. And when I discovered Elen of the Ways, it was like I had always known her. And
I noticed with a recent Facebook post, you made a reference to Judith Shaw. You must be reading and following her a little bit lately.
Yes.
And how has that been inspiring? Because any chance we can actually see your altar? You've actually got a deer goddess altar. Any chance you can put the camera around to that?
Not really. But
Okay, it was just so pretty. I wish I'd got the picture of that. Oh, there's a story there.
So there's a story here. There's this place in the woods that I used to wander to when I was a teenager. I never stopped wandering off by myself, even though it kind of drove the elders crazy. But at this point, I had heard of Conunus, the Green Man, and stories of Herne the Hunter, who was also, an antler deity connected with the deer. And I took a little hike up a hill, deliberately looking to connect with the spirit of the deer. And when I got to the top, there was this gift waiting for me. So this is an antler from one of the local deer in that place. So this goes on for.
That's quite amazing. Excuse me. So this, how is the deer goddess yourself? How are you going to conversation of your reverence that you're going to be going through this Yule, through this midwinter, through this solstice? How are you going to show your reverence? I have seen the picture of Donna's altar, which is quite beautiful, and thanks for the big antler story there. Goodness, that looked massive over it. So Ina, how are you celebrating?
Well, I am celebrating the winter solstice, and generally for all the festivals, I always like to go outside into nature and first of all see what is happening in nature and connect to it. And well, we probably have a fire and resume what has happened in this year and how we will be going into the new sun cycle. And of course, the winter solstice has a lot to do with the sun, and we connect to the deer goddess, of course, bringing back the sun, but also generally connecting with nature. We connect to the spirits of nature and the deities of nature. So yeah.
And Donna and yourself, how are you going to be revering the deer, the solstice, and even the ways of Elen herself? You've given a lovely description so far, indeed.
Well, for the most part, it's including these images on my altar. I'm also going to be part of our Unitarian Sunday service, where we will talk about the legends of the deer and the deer goddess and Elen, of course. And I especially love that when I discovered there was a goddess connected with the deer and the pathways, that it was this beautiful Elen. And I've only in the last 5 years begun to explore her mythologies and to find literature and see beautiful things on Facebook that talk about her. And for the solstice, on Solstice Eve, I will be outside wassailing my apple trees, some cider and ale and rainwater, and giving a blessing to all my fruit trees. It just seems right to that. But that's
we're going to be covering. That's wonderful as well. That's something I'm going to be covering on the 27th. We're going to be including wassailing, and should have a couple of special guests for that. Here tends to be mainly, I suppose, at the old Christmas, as they used to say, the Epiphany. But it's amazing how many people have brought that to more or less a solstice thing. And she was talking about the Green Man. Of course, the Scottish, the Glishtig, that's actually the Green Woman. And that even goes back earlier, I suppose, than the Green Man. So there is a Green Woman there's a kayak in Scotland. She's kind of been replaced by the kayak bearer, just like in Ireland. So she's pretty much taken over. But that's just so I make a reference to that, that she's always depicted as being part of the green. Well, that's wonderful that we got the two of you there and your visions. What of talking of the goddess? There's the various books. Who have been your favorite authors and teachers of the deer mythology? Where have you been picking up the mythology? The one thing you beautifully described is how you've actually just gone outside and followed the ways, that you've used your senses, that you really have followed it like Elen of the Ways. You haven't gone out with an Ellen book. You haven't gone out with a Judith Shaw book, or you haven't gone out with an Ellen book, an Ellen Sentia book, and sort of followed the instructions. You haven't done like, I suppose, like with the lady hunters with the John Michel and looked at his books. You've actually gone out there and followed the ways. But even so, what are your teachers? What have been your teachers and your inspiration? I'll start with you again with that, Ina.
Well, I learned a lot from a local friend here who's a druid, and that's Michael Walsh. He is the godfather, the fairy godfather of my daughter as well. And I got to know him a long time ago, and he told me all the stories of the mythology. And when I read, of course, I read a few books of the of the mythological stories. I really enjoy the stories of Ella Young, but I can't tell you in specific now which books, you know, would relate especially to the deer goddesses, but all of the mythology stories that we have, or that, you know, the different ways to tell the stories, may it be Yeats or Lady Gregory or Ella Young, they're all great stories. You know, they're all lovely retold. And yeah, so, you know, definitely the stories of Fleas and Sidhe you find in there. And the best is, of course, if you get them told orally, like I did from Michael. And yeah, he showed me the palace of Fleas, and we discovered and looked for her crystal palace. And I don't know, you know, who of all of you knows the story of the cataract of Fleas, where she is kind of fighting against Maeve. It's a very funny, actually very funny story.
I've only heard that one from Michael Quirk. Michael Quirk gave a brief thing. Hello, Morlin. Lovely to see you. Are you ready to follow the deer for Christmas, for the solstice, Morlin? Have you been following deer?
Huh? Have you been following deer and tracking deer? Yeah.
Yes.
Did
you find any antlers?
No.
Okay. Well, have a lovely solstice as well. Now, and your inspiration, Donna, what inspired you? How did you get taught into the deer following, deer goddess?
So, like you said, didn't start with reading a book, or I didn't even have any human teachers. I had the deer themselves that fascinated and inspired me. But because I've loved books all my life, I just naturally gravitated toward books about nature, books about people who lived in harmony with nature, which eventually led me to the stories of the deer goddess and Elen of the Ways. I believe Ellen Sentier was one of my first teachers as far as books goes. And the beautiful Gather Victoria page, where they talk about the reindeer goddess, and they show that video, which is just stunningly beautiful. And my latest discovery has been Judith Shaw, who it turns out lives in Albuquerque, which is not very far from me. So when things get to be safe again, I'm going to have to look up her studio and pay her a visit. But this has been an ongoing journey, and each year I go a little deeper. And finding that there are deer mythologies in Ireland. When I was in Ireland a couple of years ago, there was St. Gobnet and the white deer that
yes,
to her monastery. You know, that's a story to be told in January, which is when her feast day is. And then the red deer, which there are tales of red deer as well as reindeer in Irish and English mythologies. So there's a lot.
Oh, that's fabulous. Making a reference of what even the short time you've been in Ireland to discover those, and there is a lot, and it's been a difficult process of me trying to actually grab different bits and putting them in. But yeah, the Governor, the white deer, there are various stories like that. It's great that you brought that up. I think the lovely thing that both of you have brought this up is that you've actually been told, somebody taught the story, or you had the inspiration. It's like you've been visited by the deer goddess yourself. It's like you have been visited by the elder of the deer who've said, just use your senses and follow the way. And then if you've seen books and articles, it's almost been like a verification. There's someone else that's following it. And I love that process where you can actually discover yourself and then read the instruction manual last, which I think that's definitely the best way of living. So thank you so much for your contribution on that. I'm going to have to close this off and see what's coming up, but we'll hope to see you again. Ian has got so much to talk about. A lot of this is going to go into the she, water, and tree folklore course, and this is obviously something that could have gone for hours. So thank you very much, both of you, and bye to Ina, bye to Donna, and bye to Maureen, and lovely to have you on board. Thank you so much. So that was great to have those guests. So I'm quickly going to get back to show you what's coming up. Some of this stuff, I suppose, is going to be sort of duplicated in a way. What we got coming up next week, 20th of December, the day before the solstice. We got the Yule log tales, and I went into a little bit of that, but there's an old Yule log picture there. I'm going to be talking about the Grand Conception stories a bit, and then on the 27th, it's going to be the wassailing. Going to go into that, which I didn't really have time for last week, and we got a special guest for that, which will be lovely. I think even Claire will be involved in that as well, because I'm going to be on mobile. I'm not going to have the gear that I use on the usual Sundays, so that's going to be interesting. But it's going to be preparing for first footing and the relationship for the first footing, which is a Scottish tradition, but it is very much like the, in a way, it's related to the wassailing. I think it's a watered down form of wassailing. So that's the 27th. And then the 3rd of January, it's going to be a very casual event. It's an introduction of how we're going to hopefully present Sunday sessions through 2001. It won't be long before it's March, and this has been going on online for a year. And I hope I'll be able to change the format by then. Various tutorials for the courses will be there. I won't need to explain so much on the Sunday sessions. Hopefully we'll have more guests, and it will be very much a panel situation and more social. So we'll talk more about that on the 3rd of January. I haven't got a picture up for that. Oh yeah, I got a first footing picture here. There we go. That's the first footing, and it's very lucky if you're coming first footing and the person is a dark, handsome person carrying some coal. And then on the 10th of January, get back into the folklore divination, and it's not going to be the Orne divination this time. It's going to it's going to be different ways people use for divination. Quick look at any extra comments. And again, we've gone, Sherry's still with us. And thank you all so much. Have a lovely Sunday. And Marcella, I'm glad it was interesting. Margie and Sherry, thank you all for hanging on with what we got here. Is there anything I've missed out? We had a succession of videos. Is there any? I think we got all the videos in. Fantastic. So all it leaves me to do is thank you again. It's kind of a reminder that this is covered by your patronage, and all patrons are going to get the access to the course when I got it. It's finding it's people. I'll give you the address here. This is where you subscribe anyway. I bring that out every week, so appreciate your support on that. Thank you again there for Ina and Donna who were on board. And for those of you watching later, sorry about the quietness at the beginning, but keep commenting here if you watch this after being live or I'm watching the archive. And please subscribe to the bell icons that are on both YouTube, and I gather they're now on Facebook as well. And that reminds you of what's coming up that I've been explaining. So enjoy a safe week full of wonder, inspiration, celebration, and enchantments. And I think at last, you might be saying, till next Sunday, play well. Lovely to have you with us. So bye-bye.